Let's continue from where we left off in the previous one. So in the previous one, we looked at steps 1 to step 10. And in this one, we want to look at steps 11 all the way to 20. All right, so every painting is a frame, and we want to wrap the canvas element in another div, and we want to give that div a class of frame. Okay, so this is the canvas div that we have, and we want to wrap it in a new div like so. Let me indent it properly. All right, now in this new div, we want to give it a class of frame. Okay. All right, then we want to target the frame class using the frame class selector. So the way we do that is just to use the dot notation. So we write a dot in front of the name of the class like so. Then we bring our curly braces. Then the first style we want to add is the border. So we can use what is called the border shorthand declaration like so. Okay. And we want to use solid. So the reason why we're using this border shorthand is because we can do border style, okay, and say solid. You can say border color and say black, and you can say border width and say 50 pixels. Okay, and once we do that, we'll have this border around it. But instead of writing border style, border color, border width, we can just write border. Okay, so we can just clean this one off and just write border, and the first value we'll give it will be the style, so in this case solid. The second value will be the color, which is black, and then the third value will be the width, which is 50 pixels in this case. So once we do that, we have the exact same border around it. Okay, so that's what we call the border shorthand. Once we use the shorthand declaration, there's no need to write the individual styles one by one. Okay, so the frame is too wide. So what we want to do is we want to set the width to 500 pixels. So we say width and set its value to 500 pixels. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to use padding to adjust the space within an element. Okay, so for example, in the frame, we want to use padding shorthand property to increase the space between the frame and the canvas element by 50 pixels. So the shorthand will increase space in the top, bottom, left, and right. So again, just like we did for the border, we can do padding top and say 50 pixels. Okay, say padding right, for example, and say 50 pixels. Say padding bottom, say 50 pixels, and say padding left and say 50 pixels. Okay, which will work. But since all of these are the same value, which in this case is 50 pixels, there's no need to write padding top, right, bottom, and left. We can just write it once as padding, and it will be applied to all four sides. So as you can see, once we write padding and we give it a single value, it is applied to all four sides, both top, right, bottom, and left. Okay, so let's continue. Next up, we want to use margins to adjust the spacing outside of an element. Okay, so again, it's the same thing like we did. Instead of writing margin left, right, top, and bottom, we just write the shorthand, which is margin. And if we give margin or padding just two values, what happens is that the first value is applied to the top and bottom, and then the second value is applied to the left and right. Okay, so in this case, we want to give a margin of 20 pixels and then auto. Okay, so what this does is that it's auto. Yeah, so what this does is that it sets the margin top and bottom to 20 pixels. Let me give it 60 so that it's more clear. So as you can see, if I give it 60, the margin top and bottom increases, okay? But the left and right does not increase. That's because the first value is only being applied to the top and bottom. Okay, so let's send it back to 20. And left and right, auto is being applied to it. So as you can see, because of that, if I stretch the preview here, we can see that this, our element stays in the middle because margin left is auto, margin right is also auto. Okay. All right. Add a new div element inside of your canvas element. Give the new div element the attribute with a value of 1. So we want to add a new div element. And for this div element, we want to give it a class. And the value of this class attribute is going to be 1. All right, so now we want to target the one div that we just added. And we want to give it a width of 425 pixels. Okay, next up, we want to set the height of 1 to 150 pixels. Okay. And then moving on, we want to give it a background color. So we'll say background color and give it a value of this right here. All right, so as you can see now, we have our first div here. So as a reminder, this is what we are building. Okay, so we have this brownish looking rectangle, and within it we have 3 boxes in there. Okay, so that's what we are building. So our first box is in, although it's not correctly positioned, but we are going to work on the positioning later. For now, let's move on. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to use margins to position the one element, which is this one right here. And again, like we mentioned in the previous one, we can use what we call the margin shorthand. So as a reminder, for the margin shorthand, anytime we give it 2 values, what CSS does is to apply the first value to the margin top and margin bottom. And then the second value is applied to margin left and then margin right. So in this case, the first value we want to give it is 20 pixels. And then the second value we want to give it is auto. Okay. Now, as you can see, our box is centered nicely. All right, so we'll end this one here and then we'll continue in the next one. So see you in the next one as we continue to build our Rothko painting right here.